this week in another Spanglish series. Now presented, I'm very, very excited about this one because now we're presented with the MAS Barrientos Mexican American Cultural Center. And what a awesome way to start, but with this amazing musician and educator, Roy Mitchell-Cárdenas. Roy, thank you so much for doing this and sharing some time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here, especially something that is, under this umbrella of Spanglish. I mean, that's really, a lot of people don't realize that, but that's who I am. Very half, raised on the border. Very, I used to drive my father crazy because, he is from Houston. He's American, went to Mexico, studied, has a master's in Spanish. And whenever we would speak Spanglish and wouldn't speak just Spanish, he would drive me nuts. But he loved it. Anyway, now all the effort he put forth in learning the language, and then people are like, yeah, vamos a ir a las movies a las 5. He'll be like, what? Anyway,
honestly,
thank you for having me.
For me, oh my God, no, thank you so much. And for me, there was an adjustment period porque quería corregir a todo mundo de que no se dice parqueadero or like, no, you're flexing language. But now I do it. Pasamos todo el tiempo aquí, por lo regular trabajo en inglés y mi vida social, no toda, pero mucha es en español. Entonces, it comes for like your thing in both languages, and your some feelings I feel like are way easier to express in one language or another, which is also very strange. Sí, pues por eso hicimos esta series, porque es algo que todos pasamos, todos compartimos, la gente que hablamos español con raíces latinas y que, even if you don't speak the full language, probably your abuelita or your tias or someone, you get what they're saying for sure. Yeah. I like this program a lot. It makes me, it allows me to be Spanglish guilty free. Ok, entonces para los que no te conocen, ¿nos puedes platicar un poquito de quién eres? ¿Cuál es tu background?
Yeah, I grew up in McAllen, Texas, like I was saying, right on the border in the valley. And every time I would say that, people are like, oh, you're from the valley, like California Valley? I'm like, no, not really. Very different place. But yeah, the valley, Rio Grande Valley, RGV, whatever you want to call it. So I just refer to it as the valley, and specifically McAllen. And my dad's American. His side is from originally from New Orleans, so kind of this, French lineage background. And my mom is from northern Mexico, specifically from Saltillo, Coahuila. And I have a lot of family in Monterrey and Matamoros, Reynosa. And so being that, my dad went to Mexico to study Spanish, met my mom, and when they decided to move to the States, they settled on McAllen because my grandmother, mi abuelita estaba ahí in Matamoros, and we were there all the time. So that world that I was always in between. I went to school, everything's in English in McAllen, but every weekend, lots of summers, I would, spend in Monterrey, or I'd go to Mexico City sometimes. Almost every other weekend, I was in Matamoros, skating throughout Matamoros, having fun there. And it was just kind of the backdrop to everything that I was doing. And then the valley itself is very Spanglish. I mean, all my friends, literally, 99% of them had some kind of Latino background, whether it was Argentino, Colombiano, majority were Mexican, but a big mix. So, it was always just kind of there. And actually, I took it for granted, I think, for a long time. And almost want to say resented it in a way for a while, because I wanted to get out of that environment to something different, you know, kind of when you grow up and something is so familiar to you. And,
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't necessarily like, you know, the music landscape that dominated and still dominates, I assume, because I haven't been to the Valley in a while. It, you know, it was Tejano, and norteño, música grupera, whatever, you know, like that kind of style. And for me, it's like, all right, mariachi music was great. My dad loved trio music, you know, los panchos. Like I grew up playing that and listening to that. But it wasn't like I wanted to go play that music. I was a, you know, punk rock kid. You know, I loved punk music and new wave music. And by the way, I have to plug it. I don't know if you've seen it. There's a great documentary called As I Walk Through the Valley.
No.
And it's about the South Texas music scene going back all the way to the 60s. And they talk about this a lot, where you feel like, you know, I'm not Mexican enough to be like totally Mexican, and I'm not American enough to be totally American. Like I'm really in this in between stage. And I noticed that when I left, finally, I left to go to college in New Orleans, and to Loyola University. And that's where I really discovered, you know, I'm missing a lot. I was taking for granted just people that understood, like, if a word didn't come to me and I said it in Spanish, it was fine. Or just, you know, what certain foods were like. It was just kind of a culture shock to me. Yeah. So long story short, I moved to New Orleans, kind of connected with my dad's side of the family. And that's where I met the guys from Mute Math. Because Paul, the lead singer, he's a native New Orleanian. And from there is kind of, New Orleans was in a way kind of my second home, where it was kind of like my musical home. That I feel like I grew in a different place there musically. And then from there, Mute Math, you know, it's a long story, but Mute Math, you know, kind of went on from there.
Ya, y a ver, leí en tu Wikipedia que empezaste con bandas a los 12 años. Is that true?
¿Empecé con qué?
A tocar con bandas a los 12 años.
No, a los 6 años.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, empecé porque mi papá es músico, así que él toca guitarra y canta. Entonces, yo empecé como like around 6, guitar and drums right at around the same time. I don't know why that's on that wiki. Wiki. I started very early, and thankfully, I think it was a great upbringing, very musical home, you know, with a musical father. My mom didn't play, but she me apoyaba mucho, ¿no? En cualquier cosa. Estaba ahí, like, yes, let's, you know, we'll find this and we'll do that, and, you know, just lovely, just such a nurturer. So, yeah.
Oye, y entonces nunca tuviste un pensamiento de que voy a ser arquitecto, voy a ser, like, whatever, like, you always knew, kind of, that you were going to be a musician?
I kind of always knew, and I fought it for a long time, because, so the other background, you know, my family supported me a lot in music, but at the same time, there was always this thing, like, you know, my dad and mom are very educated. My mom has a law degree from Mexico. My dad has a master's degree and a couple other degrees. So college schooling was always very, I don't want to say pushed, but encouraged. Like, that's the road you're going to go down, because music is very difficult and many people don't make it. So I always fought music as a full-time career. Like, I was just on the fence. I don't know how many times I quit school, I went back and quit again. And, you know, case in point, I was in law school when I quit Mute Math. I mean, when I quit law school to join Mute Math. I was just starting my first semester because I had kind of been through another segment of doing music full time, that I was just tired of the music industry. And I thought it was kind of over. So I was like, well, I'll finish and I'll go to law school. And I was pretty miserable, to be honest.
Yeah.
So it was a risk. And I just gotten married, and my lovely wife, who also, she's very Spanglish fluent. She's Puerto Rican. She's from Miami, but she's Puerto Rican Dominican background. So our house is full on Spanglish, code switching.
Awesome.
But anyway, yeah. So it was always in my heart, but something I always really battled. You know, and I did. Eventually I got my degree from Pan American and UT Pan Am there in Edinburgh, and went on to law school, but never finished.
That's crazy. But yeah, I mean, and I guess we all have to go through that phase, but because your parents were supportive on music, you had to rebel in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents were thrilled. I mean, I guess they were. I really, from forever, I wanted to be an archaeologist, but then like right when it was time to apply, I had to move, and I kind of chickened out, and I was like, no, I like art a lot. And I mean, I did, but it was more like, it was because of the circumstances, not so much about my career. But they were like, yeah, whatever, like just do the thing, don't leave school. But yeah, anyway.
Is that what brought you to Austin?
No, actually, what brought us to Austin is like I was already with Alfredo, as you know, and he's a musician, and he didn't speak English at all. And he's like full-time musician, and I was doing booking and management for music and for arts in Monterrey. But whenever things started to be like a bit ugly, and I mean, luckily I'm a citizen through my dad's side. I was like, let's just move to a place that it's welcoming of us, and that it's where you can learn English and where you can kind of develop. And we thought Austin was a good choice. We came, and everyone like we went to a home slice, like, and the pizza makers were singing and having fun, and we went to a museum, and the guards of the museum were super sweet and telling us like, you should move to Austin. And we're like, if those positions that are not as exciting as other positions or other jobs are, like, if they're happy and welcoming, like, yeah, that's what we want. Because we knew we were gonna face a challenge, like coming to a different place. We didn't know anybody. So we were like, okay, if we have to get those jobs, I mean, that great, those jobs, but we were very focused on arts and music. So we're like, if we end up having to get those jobs, like, we want to make sure that the environment and the people and everyone's nice and happy.
Yeah.
And it was super naive in our end. Like, we really had a good life in Mexico with the arts, and it starting here was really complicated because most of our work, it's aided by networking, and we had zero networks. But yeah, I mean, we made it happen, and Alfredo's a crazy good musician, so it just took extra effort, but it worked out eventually.
Austin was always like the mecca for us growing up. I say us, just the community of musicians in the valley, that it was like the cutting edge place. And honestly, it was a place I had to go a lot, because if I wanted to see any shows, they were coming to Austin. No one would come to the valley. Nothing outside of Tejano, or
Yeah.
or like, even back then, really not even like stadium. I know they have the Dodge Arena now, and like bigger shows are going through, but
Yeah.
I mean, it was rare that anything would come through. So like, I have many good experiences in Austin growing up too, just making my way up there and seeing all kinds of bands. And that's good to hear that Austin's been good to you. I know it can be tough sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just like the cultural shock. Like, and I grew up with family in McAllen too. My dad lives there actually right now,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and I have Yeah, yeah, I have family over there, so we were always familiar with the culture, but just moving and starting from scratch where your resume doesn't matter that much because nobody knows you, and going with Alfredo to auditions because he didn't speak English, so I was there translating. It was just funny and awkward and weird. But once, like, and he did one tour, and in one tour he came speaking English, and we're like very happy. Shout out to Mobley team and team that
Yeah,
really.
I remember, speaking of the time when I met you guys in somewhere south of Austin, we played a
I,
festival.
yeah, I think it was in San Marcos. It was the Float Fest.
Yeah, that sounds right. That was, I meant to tell Alfredo the other day that that was just such a memorable day for me because my tío Beto came to see
Mm-hmm.
me that show. He had never seen any of the shows, and he was really close to me. He was like a second father to me, and it was just really great because unfortunately, UMath never went to McAllen. We never went to, Monterrey. We only played Mexico City once, I want to say, for Corona Festival or something like
Uh-huh.
that
Yeah.
in 2010, creo. But it was a real shame that we never, and that was the closest thing. So, and I had my mom there too. I had cousins. I have a lot of family, and I always will remember that day so vividly and with such good memory because it was a special day, and that show
Yeah.
was great. I mean, they killed it that night. I remember I was like, man, this is really good.
Sí, sí, también nosotros nos acordamos muchísimo por todo. Y Denise Quintanilla, shout out to Denise, like
Oh yeah,
she's the
yeah,
one that introduced us to you. And we were
yeah.
so excited because we had just seen you. And so we were like vibing with you. Like we were like, oh my God, it's just such an impressive show to see live. So yeah, we felt those super groupies, but we were like, fuck it. Like, we don't, doesn't matter. They won't remember us. But yeah, it was a really really nice show, and actually like I don't think that they're doing Float Fest anymore. Like sadly, as many festivals nowadays. Um, but yeah, oh, that's so nice to know that all your family was there to enjoy you.
Yeah, it was good. It was a really good memory, and that's the closest. I mean, because now obviously it's not going to happen, and so at least that happened, that day. And yeah, so
And it was massive too. Like it was a bunch of people. Like
yeah,
yeah,
it was
I'm,
a,
I'm
it was
sure they were very impressed.
it was a good festival. I remember it being a real good festival, a good setup, and the what's the name of the band that headlined?
Oh
Fanagram.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yes, so good. I really like her.
They were ridiculously good. Yeah, yeah, it was cool. Great experience. I'm glad it happened. I'm glad we're able to do this out of that
I
too.
know.
We lost touch, so.
Yeah, yeah, it's really good. It's just happy memories, like everything connected to you. Like it's always like, oh yeah, Roy, like he's so nice. And again, like this is our sixth session, and everyone that we've talked to, like we have a special connection and admiration, and it's people that are always in pro of community and just like let's just all help each other together and we can all grow and we can all learn from each other. So yeah, it's very nice. And talking about that, I'm reordering the questions, but who cares? Yeah, tell us about the work that you're doing for education, because I'm also super impressed on all the things and how you've been able to just spread knowledge in such a fun way.
Yeah, well, the primary thing is a project called Electro Kids that I have, just basically a YouTube channel right now. And we started with my kids. I started creating just fun songs for them to learn, the basics. It started when my oldest son Rocco was 5, I want to say, when we created our first song, and then it kind of grew more and more out of that. Most recently in the last 2 years, where it really became a thing, and we started doing different videos. And education for me has always been an important part. I was even teaching before mute math. So there was a moment when I was finishing my undergrad, I was teaching from home, just private lessons. And then that kind of continued even through mute math, where I do Skype lessons. There was a point where I would do one-on-one lessons on the road, where people would come and hang out with me. I've done lessons on the bus, backstage. We do like a tour of the stage, and they could check out, kind of the setup and the gear we would have. And so it's always kind of been maybe in my DNA of like just wanting to give back that way, maybe, and just appreciating all the teachers that I had, growing up. So Electro Kids is a bilingual. I want to branch out more into like Portuguese and French and different languages, as well. But right now it's just Spanish and English, and like the basics, colors, shapes, things for early learners. And then on top as well, just teaching, music, teaching guitar and teaching bass, especially since most people know me as a bass player, and just kind of taking that angle on that type of learning, where it's more like about the story of, because there's so many like, this is how you hold the bass, and this is this is, the fretboard, and like all that stuff's important, obviously, but there's so much information right now and so much free resources, which I think is great. People can find it. I think my twist on it was, well, what's the background story of why you do this, or why do you choose this, or how did this creative process happen? I think some of the education material out there doesn't go into that side of things. And then for Electro Kids, by the way, I wanted to put a new spin on it, where it was kind of like a very modern early learner, where it's, a lot of fun, because I would see some of the other videos that were out there, and I would just like, oh my gosh, if I hear that song one more time, I would just like, I need to do my own version of it, and then so I just love giving back in that way, and spreading, just the good news, if you will, of that kind of that thing, just music and art and culture, and the creative process, which I think alludes to, like, a lot of people are like, well, how did you come up with this, or what, and it's not really, I mean, I think it's something you can learn, but I think it's also kind of something that needs to be practiced, that it's like, if you will, forgive the analogy of like, it's a muscle, you exercise that, and the more you exercise that creative process, I feel like in all things, writing, filmmaking, art, drawing, music, production, just all those aspects of it, is something that grows and you get better at the more time you spend doing.
Yeah, and what a good way of teaching, and to spin it your way, because I also feel like for creative people, like, we need to know the reasoning and the process, and why is this happening, and why does this make sense, and not this other way, or like just challenging, because we are not so square, or like, I don't know. I do think it's like, I cannot understand if unless you explain me like all the background, y por qué es esto, y por estás seguro que debe funcionar, o quién dijo eso, de que no te creo, or like, so if you give some background, I bet it's way easier to remember and to just engage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a multi-sensory thing, and like you said, there's just, there's multiple angles that you can take on thing. No hay una forma hacer todo. I like, just all these different facets that we are taking in, that we explore, and that inform the creative process. And that's what I try to get into, especially in the in my YouTube videos when people talk about, or when I'm talking and explaining a song or how to play a song. It's not just the mechanics of the technical part. There's some, there's obviously some of that, but it's also the process of how did we get to this point? Like what informed that along the way? And a lot of it has to do with culture and my dad, and I always go back to that too. My dad is, a 60s rock musician, influenced by blues and rock. And then also I think the secret sauce is by Latin music, like, the listening to mariachi music, listening to, salsa or, música del Caribe, like more Afro-Cuban. And there was a time for me that I really dove into that world. Like, really studied and played. I played in the UTPA salsa orchestra for a while, and I had a good friend who, Cesar, who was an amazing conguero, cubano que, just increíble como tocaba. Y me ayudó mucho en ese aspecto, ¿no? De aprender música del Caribe, de música latina. También hablando de hay música de Colombia, de Argentina. All these different countries have their thing, and it's just so rich and exciting to bring that into like a mute math track, and people are like, well, what, it's just, it all informs itself, it's like I can't separate, well, I'm going to make this, this type of track, like this very, I don't know, whatever, I don't know, punk rock song, or I'm going to make a very electronic song. Like all the rhythms and all the different aspects infuse themselves, start to blend into this thing. And we were talking about the other day, I think an artist that does this, even language-wise, is Manu Chao. He brings in culture from all over the world, and I love that. I love that melting pot of things. It's exciting place to be.
Yeah. And would you say, like, aside from this, like what other exciting parts of your life or your personality like gave you having Latino roots? Like, ¿qué partes de ser latino te crees que tienen como que ver con tu identidad y ventajas que te hayan dado de que creciendo y viviendo aquí en Estados Unidos?
Yeah, I think just that, what I was talking about, like just an appreciation, or maybe understanding I don't want to say knowledge, because I'm always learning, like, but like, just this idea that we aren't just one thing, like we're a multifaceted, or I feel like I am of just all these different cultures, and being that, for me, like opening up, like, listening to Latin music growing up, and then listening to Texas blues, listening to The Cure, listening to, everything and anything, I feel like makes you more open to that. And when you realize that all these things can inform music and your creative process, is really special. But I feel like you have to give each of those its respect too. Like, like I really dove into Afro-Cuban music, and really, like, books and learning. There's a great book called El Bajo Cubano Verdadero, I think it is. The true Cuban bass. I'm trying to think of the translation that they have. I'm totally messing it up. But anyway, it was a book that I'm talking about like 20 years ago, I got this book. That was just one example of Carlos del Puerto was a bass player, the Iraquere, and he just broke down the history of Cuban bass, for example. Dove really into that. Got into even Brazilian music, got into like just every aspect. And I guess maybe the language aspect of it, that, I could read and and understand Spanish also opened another door. So I feel like if you are, you know, open to learning things like that, and being Latino, you, I feel like intrinsically you are, because you have that influence all the time. So if you just listen and don't shut it down, it could really inform you in all kinds of music and make you understand, you know, where things are coming from. So yeah, I mean, that's probably the primary thing. One example that we were talking about the other day was like one of the first concerts I ever went to. Probably the first legitimate concert was Hombres G, and it must have been like 9 or something like that in Matamoros. Mis primos me llevaron a ver Hombres G. Son un grupo de España, ¿no? De un grupo de rock en español. And rock en español, that always makes me laugh too. It's like, it's just rock, you know? It's like, maybe, I don't know, whatever. But rock en español, I know, is like a thing. And yeah, Hombres G. I mean, of all groups, it was great. It made me feel like, wow, that's what I want to do. This is amazing. Like this, you know. And then in our own scene, in the Valley, we were unafraid. We were just ready to, like, and we did. We threw our own shows. We recorded our own albums. We made our own tapes. And so having that environment to really thrive in was just really beautiful. And I'm just forever grateful for that, you know, for that scene.
And it seems like you were very independent in doing all those things. Like you had, like, you and your friends could just make the things happen. So learning firsthand, is that true?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we were very independent. I feel like we always have had, and I've carried this throughout my life, this DIY mentality, you know, do it yourself, because especially in the Valley, I mean, people didn't even think America existed south of San Antonio. You know, I would tell people, I'm from South Texas. Oh, San Antonio. I'm like, no, 4 hours south of that. Like, you know, there's still like some stuff down there. Anyway, so like, because it was so removed, I think it was a blessing in a way, because you have no other choice, you know. And come to find out that I didn't even know of, through this documentary of the music scene, the documentary, you know, I mentioned before, as I walked through this kind of aesthetic and this DIY thing had gone back in the Valley for years. You know, people were just doing their own thing. And the generation before, I was just kind of following what they were doing. It's like they were throwing a show at the Palmer Pavilion, you know, or they were a house show, and we would go find places, and just all the resources that we had together, whether it was finding a new studio or trying to find a stage, or, you know, figuring out how to make a PA. And, you know, I would print flyers at my dad's office and pass them out at school, buy some tapes, and just, you know, we would make copies and make little cassette covers. And yeah, there was like no fear in like, are we doing this right? It didn't matter. We were doing our own thing, you know. And yeah, I feel like that really was instilled in me, that if you want something done, you got to do it. You know, no one's waiting for you, especially for us. Like, you know, no one cared about what was going on in McAllen, Texas, and Harlingen and Brownsville. You know, it's like a lot of the news was bad news, you know, of stuff that was coming out of there. And especially even now, you know, like, so it was really important for us to do our own thing. Yeah. And speaking of rock en español, there were groups back then. None of my groups, I don't think we ever did a Spanish song, but there was groups that were doing both. They were singing in Spanish and English, and continued that. I wish there was more of that. I wish there was a little bit more of like that identity, you know. But like I said, I feel part of it was, that's kind of almost our parents' thing, like, we want to kind of separate that rebellion, even though I was familiar with groups like Hombres G and Soda Stereo and like, like that kind of rock and Espanol stuff. It wasn't really where I gravitated necessarily, but later on I definitely got more appreciative of it.
Oye, y se me hace que también esta confianza y esta como you have to move on your own and by your own means, like eso es algo que te da fuerza para tomar una decisión de decir de que, yeah, I know the band that I'm working with, like it's amazing and blah, 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 but I need my own space and I need my own path. Like, is that true? Like, are you...
Hablando de cómo salir de Mute Math.
Ajá, como salir de Mute Math. Tienes tu propio path que tú te haces solo. Like, en ningún momento he visto que el destino te marque algo. Like, you seem to have a point at all times.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that confidence and that just, I don't know, maybe it's ambition too, maybe it's just, not waiting for people. And I think that holds true everywhere. This is not something that just happened, I think, because it was the Rio Grande Valley. I think that even today, maybe more than ever, because, people sometimes think they have this dream talking about like what the music industry is now, or talking about touring life and what it, like, oh, if I could just get there, everything is going to be great. I'm going to make it. I'm making a lot of money. I'm going to be famous. And, I'm just going to get that record contract or that record deal. I mean, that doesn't exist really anywhere. I mean, it's really, I feel like when people that are Mute Math, I mean, it wasn't like a bunch of labels were like, oh, this, they wanted to sign us and develop us. We were in the middle of this huge issue with the labels, and we decided to go completely independent and prove to them, because they rejected us. And if you hear this story a lot where, you get rejected and people create their own path and prove that what they have is worth doing, because that's the way to get people's attention. No label, no one's going to come give you a handout. No one's going to say, oh, here's a bunch of money, do it. The only time that may happen is someone already sees that you're doing what your passion is, no matter if there's money or not. You look at Rosalía, por ejemplo, la española, these, I think in her speech in the Latin Grammy, she was like, antes que había dinero, antes que había disquera, antes que había giras y gente y conciertos y tal y tal. We were there in the, she was in her bedroom, she said, with a mic, a interface, and a laptop, and her friend, forgot his name, the producer, making an album, doing stuff regardless of what else is happening, because, you have a passion for it. And I think, same with Mute Math, we were out there, we believed in it. We believed in what we were doing. We were building, we were using all the resources that we had. I mean, for me, like just on the personal front, I had quit law school. I quit something I worked really hard, and people, I got a lot of it. I was like, you're crazy. What are you doing? Like, you're just throwing away all this. It's like, but it didn't matter, because the belief was bigger than anything. And it was the synergy was so real. You could feel it. And when you go to shows, you can feel it. And the chemistry that we had. And you really in the early days when we were driving, we did a 13,000-mile tour in 6 weeks in a van and trailer, like literally having to drive overnight from Fort Lauderdale to Atlanta to get to the gig in time, like that kind of hustling. because we believed in ourselves, we believed in the music. So, yeah, I feel like that's when things start to happen. When you really believe in your vision, you hold on to it, you die for it. It doesn't matter what anyone is saying. Like, you have that confidence, and that was in the valley. That's in, like, I'm not saying every aspect in my life. I want it to be, but those special moments to recognize that what you're doing. Like, I'm sure you guys, like, you've been doing this before there was any support, and now you just keep doing it because it's something that's in you. And yeah. I feel like that's what is attractive. That's what calls people. People can see the as the reality, the truth, the authenticity to things like that.
Sí. 100% agree. Like, me dejaste pensando nada más. Great. Yeah. Thank you for that, because I do believe in that, and I do believe in working smartly and just having something clear of a vision and just saying, like, okay, so this is what I want. How are we gonna make that happen? And excuse me, I know your opinion is great, but maybe not right now, or help me figure out this goal specifically. Yeah, cool. Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about people that were around you, like people that supported you, that made a difference in your success and your path? Do you have any mentors, other than your parents?
Yeah, I mean, there's countless, obviously, starting with my parents and my sister as well. That they were instrumental in just providing a space, and I think my mom loved it because countless jam sessions, and my dad would join us, like in the garage. And South Texas heat, mind you, like no AC, garage door open, just jamming, getting the cops called on us all the time. It was bad. I feel pretty bad for my neighbors. So, anyway, we could have been a little bit more considerate, but yeah, I mean, obviously them, my, tíos, ayudándome con mi tío Carlos, por ejemplo, tenía una tienda de discos en Nuevo Laredo que me ayudó un montón. Yo siempre estaba ahí con él, ayudándole en la tienda, y después de trabajar un día ahí, me daba como el pago para el día, me daba un disco. He's like, all right, nice. En cualquier disco que that you want, go ahead and choose it. And so, like, just having all those resources and listening to music that way. And then he bought me this great book too, by a Mexican drummer called Tino Contreras, who is probably, you might have heard of him. He had a series called Learn to Play the Drums, and it was English and Spanish. It was English on one side, Spanish on the other, and it was instrumental to me. Like, just little things like that along the way. A lot of friends too. Eddie de la Garza in the Valley, he was a big help. My mentor, he's a Berkeley grad, and he taught me music theory, and I did a bunch of jazz gigs with him as well. And yeah, just so many people. And then at Loyola in New Orleans, I did also have a lot of other friends and professors too that help, because I was kind of in and out of school. I went to Loyola and did jazz studies there for a while. I did music studies at North Texas as well. I was there for one semester. But there's those little things like, just taking some, truth, some knowledge there, and then applying it. And who else? Man, I don't know. I guess the early days is probably the biggest ones, like those people I mentioned.
Yeah.
family and close friends. I'm probably forgetting someone. Forgive me if I didn't mention your name, but there was a lot of people on the road, down the road. And even today, I still try to, listen and learn from people. You never stop learning, you just always have to keep going. And I think the moment that you think you know it all or don't need to learn anymore is when
Yeah.
te vas al piso.
Definitivamente. Yeah, and todo cambia tan rápido que en este preciso momento es que es estúpido pensar que alguien es muy chingón, de que no, we're all like, todos se nos movió el tapete, todos estamos teniendo que reaprender muchas cosas, and it's a good moment to stop and rethink and adjust and just keep going.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, do you have anything else that you would like to share with us? Are you planning something with Electro Kids or with your other projects?
Not necessarily right now. Electro Kids is kind of just coasting a little bit. I've been just, doing some production music right now for a company called Soundstripe, and been building my own YouTube channel, trying to get more videos out with, we talked about, and also a course that will go along with that, which will be a bass teaching course, and a little bit more in there, and then I have another big project that I've had. We were supposed to go to South by this year. We were going to play, obviously it got canceled. And the project's called The Pink Dust, which is with a good friend of mine, Cliff Littlefield from Corpus, another South Texas guy. And we're working on another album right now. So yeah, I always have, a lot of things going on, probably too much sometimes, but I feel like it's just the nature of the beast, and also my personality. I just like doing a lot of stuff. I cannot be still. I like exploring new ideas, trying new things. For Soundstripe, like one thing that's been fun, I do 3 different genres of music, and one of them is like a very acoustic Latino version where I'm doing everything from like bossa nova to son montuno to just like all these different styles. So doing that has actually been a great exercise to try different genres that influence, but I not necessarily have always done a specific genre of that music. And anyway, but yeah, I feel like just learning, I'm kind of addicted a little bit to learning. But yeah, no, other than that, not really. I just thank you for for inviting me to be part of this great project, and espero que tengan mucho éxito con esto.
Muchísimas gracias. Estamos encantados de poder platicar más contigo y conocerte un poquito más y compartir con nuestros amigos tu historia y por qué es importante seguir tu pasión y ser fiel a ti mismo y a tus goals o sí, a lo que quieres. Muchísimas gracias a ti, muchísimas gracias al ESB Barrientos, Mexican American Cultural Center por ayudarnos a presentar a Roy. Estamos al contacto, esperamos ver más de lo que estás haciendo y ojalá que puedas venir el año que entra para South by.
Espero que sí. Espero que sí. Gracias.
Un abrazote y saludos a toda la familia.
Igualmente, gracias.